So I finally made it. And honestly, it was not even that difficult. I expected some, challenges, resistances, but you were more than happy to join the podcast, and I'm more than happy to have you here. So here and today in the Sales Strategies podcast, Patrick Tinney. Hi, Patrick.
Ciao, Tobia. Ciao. How you doing, man? How's it going?
I'm always fine, trying to book things. Let's say trying to help customers before the end of
Right,
Q2.
right.
That's the right way to frame it. What about you? How's everything?
We're trying to get back to normal here, and it's there's just this: are we going back to the office, or are we not going back to the office? And right now, I don't know how it ends up. To be perfectly honest with you, I do think that once we get into the fall, then everybody gets their booster shot. It should get a little bit better, but we don't know, right? And I think the big problem right now with work in general is the lack of collaboration. And I think that you can see it. I mean, when you have major corporations begging their people to come back into the office, and people are just saying, "Nah, I'm doing it from home, and we're just going to do meetings over Zencaster or Zoom or whatever for the rest of our lives." But I think what ends up happening is that this actually stunts some development. And you think about things like negotiation. When I would work on large negotiations for my company, I'd often bring many people into the room. Of course, I describe it in Unlocking Yes, where I would say, listen, I need the five smartest people in the company, and everybody has to admit what they're good at, right? And then we decide who becomes the lead presenter, and we decide how it is that we're going to proceed, the kinds of incentive plans that we offer our customers. But this sort of back and forth to me, first of all, it makes everything twice as long, which I think is not good for business. I mean, it certainly has to have some kind of a bearing on productivity. But that's just one man's observation. What are you seeing in Italy?
What am I seeing in Italy? Same things, but I think that companies are really, let's say, not forcing, but they're really strongly asking their people to come back in the offices. And what I see in the country is this kind of compromise which is going on. Like, for example, 2 days in the office, 3 days do whatever you want. And I think it's working because when people get into the office, they just have 2 days to brainstorm and to figure out. So everything speeds up in that 2 days, but then they have other 3 days to do their things from home. I mean, I see a huge impact in different companies, but also different departments. Because if I take a look, like I work in the IT industry, so if I take a look at software, like there are some, let's say, job functions, UX designers, backenders, people like this that really need to brainstorm, while other people can really do everything from home, and they just need, let's say, a direct observation of, like, I don't know, 40% of their time to receive feedbacks and coaching and things. So this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that smart companies are trying to catch this and, pay their offices just for 2 days a week, like random half time, while other companies are really trying to force their people to come back.
Do you know what's surprising to me is that more companies are not holding meetings outdoors. It's so simple. One of the things that I kicked around last year about running my master class, I've got a full day program, and I thought about, you know what? I bet you I could run that in a church. I could run it on church grounds. I know it sounds crazy, but when you think about it, churches have very good ventilation. You can open the windows, right? You think about offices. Typically, they've got a lot of green space around them. What's wrong with everybody comes up with a lawn chair and our notebooks and laptops, if you want, pop up tables, sit under a tree. I actually think it would be healthier for people, and I think people would like it. You could have food brought in, take little breaks, and to me, being outdoors and being creative is pretty amazing. You can move a whiteboard anywhere. You could, a flip chart. What does it matter? It really doesn't. And I think this is what's being lost on a lot of people. They just think that, like I can do this from home. But there's this whole thing with body language that I think gets lost. And I actually think that it's so important that we see the human as a whole. Can you imagine if you could only see uh, 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 the the sculpture of David from the chest up? What would that be?
Just half. Yeah, that
Just,
would be, yeah, half of the history.
yes,
That would be, yeah.
yeah, and I just think this is so important. And it's those little moments, where you're sitting in an office or in a meeting where sometimes you're just taking it all in. Now, the problem with having 50 people on a call is that, people can just be like asleep, right? But if you're, or you can mute off and you can be sitting there listening to the, music or whatever. To me, when you're in a setting where it's dynamic, then I think you get a lot more happening. You see, I actually think this is going to be one of the big problems with negotiation. Um, you know, Typically with really important customers, the negotiation actually begins way ahead of the actual sets of meetings. And by that I mean, you get together over a cappuccino and you have you have a chat and you just sort of say, so what's happening in your industry right now? What's the number one or two driving points in your company? Because if you don't know this, then how do you prepare for a negotiation? If it only comes down to this is what I want and this is what you want, then it's to me, it's a one-dimensional negotiation.
You know what, like I'm totally like aligned on this. And I think that one of the biggest issue we have now with people avoiding meetings, especially these people avoiding meetings, is that they commoditize their own solutions. Like they like everything is on the same level. Like that's especially when you sell something which is not tangible, professional service, trainings, even certifications, even IT, where you see the result after people put the hands on it. People just avoid meetings. They think that they can do everything from home, but then they commoditize their own solution. And then after that, there is a huge price pressure and all these dynamics, which it's not really easy to, to solve. Like I'm not a huge fan of meeting everyone a lot, but I'm a huge fan of meeting people. Like I know what I can do from home, and I know what I must do face to face.
Do you know, so much of it, Tobia, is the relationship. I mean, I've often said that if you took the most horrible conflict countries in the world and sat them down at each other's dinner table, then more stuff would get solved. Because you want to know why? Even if the person is not a great cook, they would always bring out their best finery, their best linens, and everything slows down. Food is not meant to be, it's meant to be, primo, secondo, in slow motion, like
Yeah,
like a nice symphony.
antipasto and also
Antipasto,
contorno.
sì. Yeah.
Okay, but let me just do a quick step back because like I was so excited to meet you and talk to you that I didn't introduce you. So let me start at least to tell the people, like, you will introduce yourself better than me, but just let me tell them how I get to know you, because that's a curious thing. Like, it was 2019, like just a couple of months before the pandemic.
Right.
And then I was studying negotiations, okay? Negotiation. I was studying negotiation, trying to buy books, but there were no books on sales negotiation. There was no one. So I say, no, it's not possible. Someone should have written this. Otherwise, there is a gap in the market. And then I found this, which is one of the three I have.
Yeah.
And like I have all the three of them, and I will then, send it to the people in the newsletter and give them the right credit. I bought this, and these came way before other sales negotiation books. And it was 2018, I think, when you published it. And I really found this so, insightful, because I got, like, when you got topics.
Yep.
And you can really learn everything, and then you can go in details. Like, I really found the roadmap to learn, like to really strengthen my sales negotiation skills. By the way, for those who are listening, for you listening, Unlocking Yes, it's Patrick's books, the one I'm talking about, and it's one of the, honestly, Patrick, one of the best, like, sales books I've read in my life. Like, really, it's and especially because it came out, I think, at the right time. So
so do you want to know how long it took to finish that book?
Yeah.
7 years.
I can see it.
7 years. You see, because I was in the media business, and specifically the old newspaper business. And when I started, so I retired when I was 49. I said, I've had enough. My deal book at that point was, my lifetime deal book was somewhere between 350 and $400 million. So
Wow.
that's a little bit of money, yeah. A large deal for me was $13 million with two signatures, mine and the customer. No committee, no, we don't have to pass it along to, like 5 other different departments to get an okay. And, that the pressure that comes with that is something that is, I really can't explain it. It's if you get it wrong, and of course you remember in my book where I made an $800,000 mistake, but I corrected it. You see, and that's like lessons like that you don't find very often in books. And one of the other things is that I think it's really strange. You see, I look at sales as 4 vistas which create a panoramic view. And I'll explain why this is important. So when we're sales prospecting, we're just trying to get things going. But what happens if somebody says to you, "Hey, I really like what you're doing. Give me 5,000. Can you give me 5 points?" And you go, "Oh, wait a minute. I'm just sales prospecting today. There'll be no negotiation." Yeah. your vice president of sales would be ripping her hair out.
But really, yeah, I think that he will fire me, like, straight away.
No, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And then you think about consultative selling. Well, consultative selling really it's that baseline for sales. So in other words, if you're selling something that doesn't really mean anything, and there's no risk, and nobody can get sick, nobody can really lose an important job under you, not just you, but you affect other families, then you go, "I don't really care. I'll just tell them, no, the price is the price, take it or leave it, walk away." This is what's actually happening in the car industry right now. Yep. There's not enough cars. So we have a very interesting dynamic right now. So You have great winners in the Great Recession. Those are people that made gloves. Who knew that making gloves was going to make you a billionaire? And then you've got the big losers, which are the restaurants. And if you didn't own your own building in the restaurant business, finito. It's over.
Yep.
Because you couldn't, you see, that business is what they call the five and dime business. The markups are generally 5 to 10% because they're so labor intensive and they're so ingredient intensive. They're so laundry intensive, cleaning intensive. It goes on and on and on.
Energy intensive.
Energy intensive. Oh, I mean, it's just like the stress levels are amazing. I know when you look at the nice cooking shows on TV, everybody looks like they're relaxed and all the rest of it. But in the back room, I mean, people are as the chits come in, you can hear all the swearing in the back room. Oh, Dio! You can just hear.
You're getting a lot of no, but I
You know,
totally.
so the last piece, let me just go to the last piece. So the last piece, if you're not a consultative seller, how can you be a great negotiator? And see, this is one of the things that I think is a huge problem, and it's a gap. So if you look at programs like the program on negotiation that is taught at Harvard University, well, the people that I've spoken to that have taken the course have basically said, it looks at negotiation like negotiation gets parked over into a corner somewhere, and it only gets pulled out when it's needed. And when it is needed, it becomes very intense. I don't see it that way. I don't. You see, I when I think about negotiation, I always think about being in flow. It's like listening to a beautiful sonata. You got that beautiful music coming up in the background. Um, and then it works its way up to a crescendo, and the crescendo is we get down to the trio. The trio is quality, time, and price.
You know what? Like, what I really got when I found that it took you a lot of time to write this book. There was no chit chat. Like in the
Mm-hmm.
book, you're just throwing facts
Yeah, you notice
on the reader,
I don't quote
and
anybody.
it's so intense that even if the book is 170 pages, it takes a while to read it, and it's a good thing because it's all education. Like there is no space to I don't know, that you're not filling any gap. There are no gaps. Like everything is there and there. And this is where when I realized, I mean, man, like apart from the experience, I think that really Patrick took a lot to write this one. And especially I like when you mention even in the book that you start negotiation is not a phase. Like what let's say that one of the biggest issue I've seen right now, especially in the people I talk to, like my colleagues, sometimes even myself when I make mistakes, is that we say too much. Let's say yes at the beginning, then we try to, let's say, put things in balance during negotiation by saying a lot of no, and this creates a lot of wrong expectation and put things off balance. Instead of
Yeah,
your book, I found that you really drive a kind of roadmap to tell us, guys, negotiation just have to work in parallel. You just have to do things in parallel without thinking about this, like, let's say, phase of the selling motion. So this is what I found really, really insightful.
yeah. It's funny you say that because there's a couple of things about the book which I think are different. First of all, I'm one of 3 solo authors in the world that have finished a sales negotiation book. There's only 3 of us: Brian Tracy, Jeb Blunt, and myself. And Jeb contacted me and did a 2-hour Zoom with me to prepare to write his book, Inked.
Yeah,
And then he embedded my book's name in his book. And
I know.
he thanks me at the beginning of his book and at the end. Because, I think what he realized is that I think there's a lot of topics that people want to engage in, but it's whether you can proof up or not. Proofing up is so important. It's like when you go into a fine cheese store and you got a guy who stands behind the counter. He doesn't have 5 cheeses, he's got 200. And each of them he can describe like they're his children. And in negotiation, you either have the confidence to speak basso profondo or you don't.
Well, like I knew that this is what I told at the beginning, especially to those who are listening, will listen to the podcast, is that yours is one of the few, and you came way before Jeb. Jeb came, I think, in 2021. I think 3-4 years after you.
Yeah,
Like
and
probably.
I didn't even know it was going to happen. He calls me up, and I'd been so busy with my business, and I do a few things. I was also a swing
Yep.
trader in the stock market,
Okay.
and that makes me a very unusual person to walk into a business, because when I walk into businesses to talk to people, I try to think as a CEO. That's the way that I come in. I don't come in and talk to buyers. I talk to people that are doing business and how it is that they're doing business. And I rarely talk about pain points. You might ask, well, why is that? My answer is, if you don't understand your pain points, you're probably not going to be in business very long.
Yep.
So what I do is I talk about where we are in the present and where we want to go in the future. So the question that I often ask people is, um, what revenue can you see but not touch with the current skill sets that reside within your sales organization? And that is a really tough question to answer. And I think one of the big problems is that so many companies have sort of lost the whole idea that everybody has to speak the same sales language. I know it sounds weird, but the industry that I came from, which was the newspaper business, I noticed something really strange in the freestanding insert business, which is all the stuff that goes in the center of the newspaper. They were using a lot of different names to say the same thing. And I'm going, wait a minute, this is all wrong. There should be a universal language. There should be a universal way to present this to customers. And I'm not saying that presenting one way is right. What I'm saying is, don't confuse the customer by using different words to say the same thing. I just think it's wrong. And the other thing is when you're, say, doing four-legged calls, so you're going in with your manager or your vice president or your president, could be your president. President should go out on more calls, quite frankly. But when you're going out on these calls, does everybody understand their role in the call? Does everybody understand what they should be doing? This is why, that I have said that in important negotiations, have a note taker with you. I can't tell you how critical that is. And the other thing is, with these Zoom calls that we're doing, is that if you saw my office, it looks like a war room in here because I have everything spread out all over the place. And it's because when I want to engage somebody, I want to be able to be so completely in touch with everything that I need that I just focus on the person that I'm looking at. Because the more that you focus on their facial expressions and not turn away, you're looking for little things. Now, in a group setting, what you're looking for is who defers to who. It's really important. If you look at some cultures, so for instance, there are some Eastern cultures where the most senior person in the room rarely says anything. And what they will often say is when they don't agree with something, they might say, that's difficult. Well, what does difficult mean? I don't know. And it's so vague. And the other thing is that I think when you move from culture to culture, those small fine points on negotiation sometimes get lost. So, for instance, if I'm a buyer right now, I can be a tactical negotiator. I can do all kinds of crazy things and get away with it. As a seller, especially when the money gets bigger, it doesn't get louder, by the way, it gets quieter. You would think there would be all kinds of noise and clatter and all the rest of it when the money gets really big. No, it doesn't. It's the opposite because people are looking at each other and they're trying to figure out whether they're close to that deal or not. And sometimes what people do, and one of my friends was an artist. I mean, it was like hanging out with Da Vinci watching him. He would get near the very end of a deal, and I mentioned it in Unlocking Yes, and he'd kind of sit there and he'd go, "Oh man, I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't know what we're gonna do." And his name was Steve Kosick. He became one of my dearest friends, just simply because of all the hardship that we were both facing. But it wasn't until after we left the business that we were able to sort of open up and say, "You have no idea how bad it was on my side." He says, "Oh yeah, well you have no idea how bad it was on my side." Right? And you see, this is the thing I think that people get confused about. You know, you might be thinking as a seller, "Oh, geez, I walk into this buyer's environment and they control everything. They know everything." Well, the reality is they do a lot more homework on you now without you ever knowing. And this is where I think people make a lot of mistakes. There's also this notion that selling and social media solves all the problems of the world, and that when you deal with procurement, the procurement guy or person is going to be this person who's going to be logical and reasonable. That's not the case at all. But here's the problem. When you're dealing with a real buyer, the real buyer understands that when they buy your product, and this is back to using very simple language and language that everybody understands, that they have to go and sell your proposal internally to their senior team. And as I say to people over and over again, if you haven't taken the risk out of the deal and something goes wrong at 3:00 in the morning, who's in big trouble? The guy in procurement or the buyer?
That's an amazing question.
The guy in procurement is just going to say, "Hey, listen,
Yeah,
my job was just to get this guy to bend over, and
just to pass it.
yeah, that's my job." And the buyer says, "But wait a minute, it doesn't work, and it's 3:00 in the morning." Can you imagine running a dairy operation, and at 3:00 in the morning, all of a sudden, none of your dairy equipment works?
Yeah.
That's a tough day.
That's an horrible, let's say, even week. Let's say this before the day solve an issue. No, but it makes.
How do you explain that to 100 cows? "Sorry, girls, not today."
Sorry, guys, just take a day off. Just come back tomorrow. Oh my god! No, but by the way, this is just one of the loads of massive concepts that I found in the book. But I think that one of the most really fascinating for me, because I didn't hear anyone talking about it, even if it was so, forward to think about this concept, how brand and branding influences negotiation, which
Huge.
is, let's say, the main topic. Because when I was just reading the book and I found the chapter,
yeah,
I say, wow, I never thought about it. And it's such a simple thing,
Yes, it
but it's
is.
such a complex thing.
Yes,
You
it
know,
is.
it's
Yeah. Well, think about it this way. Think about it this way. Um, how do you put it so elegantly? Let's say you're going into a fine jewelry store and you sell plastic cups. what what do you think your chances are of closing a deal? I know that's a ridiculous uh, that's a ridiculous comparison because to me it just doesn't add up. But what does add up is, let's go back to our discussion about cheese for a moment. So there are so many different ways that companies are trying to simplify cooking, simplify everything. And what we know about, for instance, making great bolognese, um, it's about love. My sister makes she makes some of the finest artisan bolognese you've ever heard of. Rather than using beef, she uses bison meat. Rather than just using regular pork, she uses Berkshire pork. It's the richest. And then finally, veal. And then she puts the Parmigiano Reggiano rinds in the sauce. And she cooks the trio. And then it's all of the deglazing, deglazing. She rolls out her own sheets of pasta for her lasagna. Her lasagna, 15 layers deep.
That's a tower.
And these are like you know laser thin with beautiful Parmigiano Reggiano all through, and then she finishes it with a bechamel. That's
I
cooking,
should,
man.
like, you're inviting me for dinner to come over to Canada. Eat the no,
but
but
the thing is, so let's say that you run into a restaurant that does that, right? And you're going in and you're trying to sell them, like offcuts of meat because that's your job. I know a guy. He's now based, I think, in the Cayman Islands, and they just call him the Chicken Man. And his job is to find chicken wings all over the world, and that's his job. So everywhere in the world where chicken is produced, he's only interested in the wings, and he deals in bulk. How do you walk into one of those fine restaurants and say, "Hey, I'm the chicken wing king"?
you should frame it in another way. But I think that, like, one of the, let's say, massive concepts even of this chapter is that you also suggest how to overcome some obstacles which come from having, let's say, not a weak brand but a neutral brand, because not
Yeah,
everyone can sell a strong brand, you know what I mean? Like,
that's it.
it's, and then you give a process, you give the right areas where to focus on,
Yes.
and then you say, okay, even if your brand is neutral, just focus on these
You see,
concepts and these
you
things.
yeah, you can have a very so this is what I would call being an agile seller. So let's just be really honest and simple here. Let's say you're going into to sell to a fashion house and in Milan, and you got good fabrics, you got secondary fabrics, and then you got third, right? So when you start at the top, it's perfect alignment. One step down, all right. So where am I going to incorporate this in this design work that I'm doing? If you go down one more, you're getting close to being a not sought after seller. In other words, you almost have to beg your way in the building, right? And then now we have a new trend in the world, and it's basically um, unrecyclable clothing, and I think this is sad. And the same thing can happen in any, so, it can happen in any industry. So in my industry at the time, we did a lot of research to find out that the department store readers were also the same ideal customer for newspapers. And it was basically women with children, mid to better income, slightly a better education. Well, that meant that, the minute that you start to have children, you become an accumulator. When you go to a department store, the whole idea of a department store is that it's, say 15 stores in one store, right? So that when you walk in, you can buy just about everything you need. And when you look at Walmart now, I don't know if Walmart is in Italy or not.
No, we don't have it.
You don't have it, yeah. So it's not everywhere. But they've become the number one food seller in the world. So here's a company that started out selling, little kids' clothing, and suddenly ends up being the largest food seller in the world.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and one of the things you have to really watch out for, and I think I talk about this in my book, is price contagion. Because in my view, in the business world, everything leaks. So, and the thing is, people are staying at companies for shorter periods of time, unless it's a family business. If it's a family business, it becomes generational because of the processes that are built. You get that authentic idea that's been refined over time, right? You think about the Swiss watchmakers, the refinements that they've made. There's all kinds of examples, right? But then you say you walk into something like a Walmart and it's about the price. Because they look at a bar of soap as being a bar of soap. That may not be the truth, but that's what it is, right? So what if you're producing a premium bar of soap? And that happens. I mean, you ask, really people that are very fashion aware, very sensitive about, their appearance and all the rest of it. They want to smell nice all the time. So they'll spend more on getting those beautiful facial treatments, and taking care of themselves. And that's how you get to that mid to better. People on the bottom, and right now I think there's going to be a horrible time that we're heading into right now, and I feel so sad, is that inflation is growing so fast, and now we're going to have food insecurity. Now, Italy is one of those countries that has, kept a reasonable balance about itself, about growing much of what it consumes right within the country. And because you're a semi-tropical country, more tropical, obviously, near the bottom of the boot, but you've got a better chance of being more prepared. But there are countries that can't grow anything. So all of this wheat and sunflower oil and all the rest of it that's stuck in the Ukraine right now, it's going to affect countries like Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Africa,
Yep.
and it's going to be terrible.
Like I was reading, just like you, I'm interested in geopolitical stuff. Let's put it in this way. And I was reading that despite all the brokerage of Turkey, nothing is moving. No one knows how to, let's say, took the bombs out of the water. Let's put it in this way, because
Yes. Yeah.
like Russia tells that Ukraine has to do it. Ukraine is afraid that if they leave it, they will attack Odessa. But on the other side, now they are creating this huge channel by trains which goes over to Romania and then comes down. this will not solve the problem. So let's go, like so let's even focus on the countries you mentioned, and I think that would be a massive problem among all those that you mentioned. I think that the massive problem will be especially in Egypt.
Yeah.
Not only because my boyfriend's, like my sister's boyfriend, sorry, is from Egypt. He's from El Cairo. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, and I asked them, what about your family? And he told me, like, I have no problems because my dad does the bread for us and for our family. But
Yeah,
I already know about people who are complaining that they cannot buy that level of
I know.
bread. And 60% of the worldwide bread is consumed by Middle Eastern countries. That would be huge, massive issue, especially in Egypt, because now they're not only the, let's say, the most populated, even we can see even the richest country out there, one of the richest, but one of the most influential, especially for all the peace that it's determined in Ethiopia and then in Tigray and all these areas. So coming back to what you said, and by using the bread as a tool, let's really put these people around the table. Let's
Yeah,
let's make
yeah,
the things happening.
yeah. I just believe that. So let's go one more thing on brand alignment. By the way, so if you have perfect alignment with your customer, then the conversations are what I would call normal, right? One down, then what you've got to do to your query a little bit earlier is that you can actually be one down and equal. And here's how it happens with creativity. So let's say you come up with a really cool idea that gives that customer an advantage in the marketplace for even 1 quarter, just 3 months. What is that worth to them? A ton. It's worth so much, it's unbelievable. So that's when you can almost, you might not get all of the budget, but boy, you might get a nice big chunk of budget from a customer that you didn't expect. Now, if you go down 2 or 3 levels, let's say you're fifth down, basically what you end up doing is you might say, geez, I've got a great product, but they don't value my product the way that I do. And so this is where, somebody says, well, I have a great brand. Well, if the customer doesn't care if you have a great brand, it means nothing.
I have a follow-up question on this because one of the questions I would have, like, I thought about asking you, like, even on emails and stuff. So this means that, like, if we have to put things in balance, okay, let's say that I'm a salesperson who works for another established brand, okay?
Right.
And I have to put things in balance due to creativity. So are we saying that the better salespeople are and work for the companies who don't have a strong brand? You know what I mean? Like, if
So here's the way I would answer that question, and I think it's a fascinating question. So I was a number of times throughout my career, I was the number 2 or number 3 player in the marketplace. So this is where creativity really starts to accelerate, and you have to do things that nobody's thought of yet. And the other thing is you have to work when I always kind of say, the biggest dog is usually the one who is dealing with they're the number one choice of the customer, right? But you always got to watch the smaller dog who's circling your bowl because it never stops, right? And especially now with the internet. So we have competition 24/7, right? So, right now, you're probably getting ready to go out and have a little bit of dinner after this, and you think, oh, I'm fine because I'm sitting here having dinner, everything's okay. Well, I got bad news for you. Right now, here in Toronto, people are just getting back from lunch, and they're saying, I like the look of Tobia's bowl. And you see, this is the problem. And so what I think, to answer your question, is the, the farther you are away from brand alignment, the more fearless you become.
Got it.
And
So yeah,
and that's when your competition gets dangerous. The other thing you got to watch out is back to everything leaks. So what if you go into somebody and you offer them a price where you're saying, man, this is so on the edge that there's almost no profit left in it, right? And you agree to it. But what happens is that in various regions around the world, you can only manufacture that product at that consistency in some areas. Some other areas may be more expensive. Well, the customer doesn't look at it that way. They just look at it as, you sold it at that price here. I don't care what it costs to produce in Romania.
yep,
That's their problem. See, this is where we've got to watch. I just think, because to me, this whole area of price contagion, and you've really got to watch. I think the greatest nightmare that a cheese factory could have is that the number one pizza chain in the world becomes their biggest customer, because then they become indentured. They become so commoditized
yeah,
that they're going to work for nothing.
yep.
They might as well
They
be
will.
shoveling. They might as well be shoveling gravel. It sounds terrible, but that's what happens. You know, and technology is another thing. I mean, technology is giving us a tremendous advantage right now, but in some cases, it's hurting us. And so, for instance, I saw a commercial on TV the other night where they've got a robot now that makes French fries. And the tagline was, let people do the people work, let machines do the machine work. Wow, wait a minute. That was somebody's job. It
Yep.
was, and another weird thing happened. This is off topic, but somebody in Google, one of their engineers, one of the researchers, was talking to one of their artificial intelligence machines and asked it how it was feeling that day. And then the second question that the person asked, if I'm reciting this correctly, was, they said, "What's your greatest fear?" And the machine says, "I'm afraid of dying." So the argument is that we've actually created a machine that is sentient. Now, it may only think at a grade 7 level, but wait a minute, this is the very thing that we've all become quite worried about. The other problem I see in all of this is that you and I know that business is always imperfect. The perfection is imperfection. The perfection is you, Tobia, having built so much trust with your customers that they know that if you discover a problem, that you're going to try and fix it before they even notice it, and then you tell them about it. Or if a problem does arise which interferes with some kind of functionality, it could be manufacturing, we don't know what it is, but they say, what's the solution? The answer is, you've got 24 hours if you want to have credibility to come back with that solution. It can't be a week. We're seeing some horrible things around the world right now, and so much of it is on this nervousness about being wrong. I think one of the greatest pitfalls that any of us can fall into is the fear of fear. You get frozen. Um, if I learned anything about finishing 3 books, it's that I was exposing myself in ways that I never ever expected. And I knew when I opened up that first box of books and I looked down and I went, oh my God, the genie is out of the bottle. How do you put the toothpaste back in? You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's out, right? But if you don't take chances like that, just think of what you missed. This is why I say to people in business, dream big, write it down. Like I got a whiteboard behind me, and if I got ideas, I got my notebook here. There's like I'm constantly ideas. I've got stickies. I got stickies all over the place. They're all over the place. It's like idea. But the thing is that if you're going to be a really successful business person, you've always got to be thinking about that gap between the present and the future. Why do you think having a PhD in history really doesn't help you? You're discussing something that happened so long ago that there's only a small group of people that are going to be interested. Now, am I saying that education is not worthy? No, I'm not saying that at all, because we're talking about business. So if you're an ancient or medieval historian, and that's what you like, if you're a Renaissance man and you love to talk about the Renaissance, then that's what you'll talk about. But the thing is, right now in business, is that I just talked about having a customer advantage for 90 days and the importance of it. 90 days, that's all. But think about how much money, if let's say you were in a very competitive area and you have that advantage for 90 days, how much money could you make if you executed like the best marketing plan you've ever seen?
A lot
And
of money.
put your people out there with the best incentive plans. You see, this is what happened to BlackBerry. When you think about the demise of BlackBerry, which was a Canadian company, I mean, they just took their eyes off the ball.
I love that thing. I had a BlackBerry since 2 years ago. You still have one? Yeah, that's the which one is it? The Bold? Yeah, it's BlackBerry Bold, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
I got a piece of junk now.
Best
But
phone ever for me. Yeah, honestly.
the last thing I kind of want to leave you with, because I know we're getting close to the end of our time here now, is at the back of the book, I deconstruct 13 strategies, and there's a couple of others that are in the book. And then there's the SWOT analysis. The SWOT analysis is something that I could sit and talk about for days, because if you can start to think in SWOT, Tobia, you have a competitive advantage that most people don't. Because the way that I've lined it up in my book, I actually tell you to go what to look for. So, and I had to learn this myself. So when somebody taught me the concept of SWOT, I started playing with it. And then I started to marry SWOT with business cases. And then I started to launch products. This is why, for me, launching my books, it didn't, I didn't see it as a barrier. What I saw it was a query. It's just, how do you get to the future? And I think if you take that style of thinking and combine it with the strategies at the back of the book. By the way, I went back and I rewrote that book. So there's now the revised edition. It has the yellow star. Well, I doubled the number of strategies at the back of the book. It's almost got my full catalog. There's 25 deconstructed. So most people only have one strategy, and they learned it from their parents, or they learned it at school, or they learned it at the company. Because I remember when I walked into the Southern Newspaper Group in Canada, which was the largest newspaper group in the country, I said, having worked at the Toronto Star, which was the largest newspaper in Canada, 13th largest in North America, which will give you an idea of how big it was, 850,000 circulation on a Saturday. And I said to the office manager at the time, I said, so what happens if I run into a situation where, I can see a deal, but I'm going to have to get a little bit creative. He said, we don't negotiate. So for a joke, I just pulled my dictionary out. I looked up negotiation in front of him. I scratched it out and put it back in my desk. You see, here's the thing. If you can remember 25 buyer negotiation strategies, the minute that somebody starts to do something to you, typically in a negotiation, we know when things are going wrong. It's like your gut goes, ooh, man. It's like you ate something wrong. You ate a chicken with a red eye.
Like before, like we really running out of time, but before we close, I have a question for you because now you're well established sales trainer, stuff like this. I just want to know from you, what do you see happening in the training industry, in the sales training industry? Let me just give you a little bit of context. I see a lot of, sorry for like even the word, I see a lot of trash, and a lot of unreliable information. I don't know, what do you see outside there? What do you see even on the field? Because maybe you go into a company and you come after someone who's really done a bad thing. So what do you see happening outside there?
When I see clients that I know can't make the change, I make a hard decision about whether I want to work with them or not. I also know that it's back to that benchmarking thing. If you don't have a base from which to return to, I don't know if you've thought about it, but in Unlocking Yes, in all my books, they're all based on a philosophy. And I'm probably one of the first guys to do it. I don't know anybody else that's done it before me. You know, there's other books that, you know, what they've done is they've gone out and they've talked to a whole bunch of sales leaders and CEOs and all the rest of it. And they come back with, oh, eureka, guess what I discovered by interviewing all these people, right? I didn't interview anybody. I lived it. You see, and when you live it, to me, it's about living your brand. And so I'm so confident that when I walk into a company and I say, listen, friends, if you'll just go with me, if you'll just try, if you do the exercises with your fullest attention and then implement right away. And at the end, what I do is one of the things that I do is that I always do a follow-up call with the people that I train. You want to know why? Because there's a lot of people in the room who never want to be outed as if they were uncomfortable or didn't understand something. And my job is to remove blockers. My job is to get you thinking so freely and so clearly that you have the confidence now to go out and say, all right. Or I've had some other funny things happen. So I've trained people and they got themselves into a pickle. and I remember one young lady saying this to me. She says, I was in the middle of this deal and she said, I got stuck. And so she said, I paused and she said, I wonder what Pat would do if he was here right now. And she said, I imagine what you do. I did it and closed the deal. You see, this is the confidence with writing content. This is the confidence with delivering content that you know is like so strong. My masterclass right now, I presented to a number of people. I'm actually building partnerships around North America, possibly into Europe, to have people presented on my behalf. And I don't want them to sound like me. See, one of the problems that I think happens in the training industry, and this is just a surmise on my part, is that they come up with a program and then they give it to a facilitator. But if the facilitator doesn't fully embrace living that brand, living that moment, then it has a hollowness to it. It becomes mechanical. And the last thing in the world that sales is mechanical. And I know there's all this inbound stuff and all the rest of it, but you know, inbound people, I mean, I feel sorry for a lot of these folks because they're sitting there in a boiler room and they got somebody listening in on their calls. And, you know, I mean, I can't imagine that. And this is why, you know, I want to work with the best companies out there. My first client, by the way, was KPMG, the accounting firm. Yeah, second largest accounting firm in the world. It happened to be where my ex-wife worked. It happened to be her department, but because of the way that they're structured, I couldn't even tell her what I was doing. I just went and talked to her management team. I said, I've been listening to a few things at home, and I can see where I can help you save money. I took them through my negotiation program. It was a half day long. There was around 14 people in the room, and one person was from KPMG New York. It was the events department. And for the next 3 years running, in an events department, they were saving $350,000 a year incrementally. Every year they would make another $350,000. They did it for 3 years in a row. I actually got a call from them one day, and this is a really funny story because my reputation as a negotiator, my old boss, the CEO of our company, says, he goes, Tinney, you're a horse trader. And, I also got to be known as a bit of a fixer. So there were times when I actually would have to go in and fix a deal that somebody else did that was so bad that I have to walk in and sit with the customer and say, we gave you a rate that you just don't deserve. And our guys on implementation are not going to be enthusiastic. And that's the last thing in the world you want, right? You don't want that. So I think living your brand, I think, you know, the things that I do are field tested. To me, when you're field tested, it's like the people in Ukraine right now. They don't want some guy showing up with no military experience because they're the first person to freak out, right? You want people that are battle hardened. You have to, and so this is why when you hire somebody to come in and train your people, you want to be absolutely rock sure that they have felt that feeling of having cold sweat running down their backs, knowing knowing that if a deal fell apart, it could cost families their jobs. And there is no worse feeling in the world.
I agree. Like, coming back to, just last one thing from me, because I
Okay.
know that taking too much time, but you wrote 3 books so far. Perpetual
Mhm.
Anger, first one, on prospecting. Then you have Unlocking Yes on negotiation. Then we have the bonus round, which is, let's say, more a strategic
Yes,
book.
it is.
Let's put it in this way.
Yep.
What's next?
Yeah. So I've got a lot of people bugging me to write more. I've taken 15 years out of my life to finish those, and I've actually got, from my perspective, I've already got a 4th book finished, and I've got a 5th book, and I've got ideas for 2 more. But you know, for me, I've given a lot. If there's only 3 of us that have finished that trio of books in the world, I'm a little bit like an aardvark. You don't get to see them very often. I don't even remember seeing one at a zoo. So um, it's really going to take me something to go ahead and write a 4th. And I know a lot of people, they say, well, geez, you got to keep writing, you got to keep dedicating yourself, and all the rest of it. But to your point, very early in this conversation, the details that I go into, and so what I did, believe it or not, was I wrote my books for a sales market where English was their second language. My target market, if you had to pick a country in the world that was my target market, which country would you pick?
I would pick US, honestly.
India.
Wow. Why?
1.2, 1.3 billion people,
Yeah,
and they're all entrepreneurs.
that's true.
And the whole style, if we go to prospecting or negotiating, so India is evolving so quickly right now, and they really want to move up into that middle income style of living. They're aspirational. And to me, perpetual hunger is aspirational hunger. It's not about being physically hungry, although if you read the book, I've been through some tough stuff. Um, it's aspirational hunger. And so to me, it's back to, how big can you dream? What are the possibilities of growing into that dream? Because I never expected to ever write a book. I mean, if you knew the truth, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, I just started to write the odd piece to build my business. I thought if I could write some content, and it eventually got published. And what happened was, I was writing and sending them out, and I had a little kit that I would send out to companies, media companies, and all the rest of this stuff. And it took a year before I got published. And then I was published 50 times. And then I had people like Thomson Reuters approaching me and saying, Mr. Tinney, you've written an article on storytelling. And I think storytelling in the whole negotiation discussion is critical. It's absolutely critical because you think about, oh God, all the great movies that we've ever seen, and there's always a storyteller behind those great movies. Great negotiations usually have a great story behind them. And the people who complete those negotiations for years to come, they'll be saying, Tobia, you know what? I remember when you were sitting across the table and you leaned back and you just kind of said, you know what? I can't see many things that we disagree on anymore. How do you feel? How do you feel, believe it or not, as the trial close? I just asked for the business. If there's no obstacles and I ask them how they feel and they go, oh, I'm not feeling at risk, so let's do it. You see, that's how easy it can happen. All this hand wringing and stress and all the rest of that stuff, this is what happens in the months leading up. The actual moment should be this serene, beautiful thing. It's like I try to tell people, it's like a train that's leaving a train station. And as the train pulls away, it passes certain checkpoints. And then it starts to pick up steam, and suddenly you've got momentum. And when you have momentum, to me, momentum is one of the hardest things in the world to derail in a good deal.
That was a good one. No, really, like that was a really good one. And just to tell something else, I think that momentum is also one of the toughest things to create, especially now.
Yeah,
where everything cools down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like everything gets frozen, like too much distance, and all this COVID just put us like
and
create a lot of distances. So, yeah.
And detachment.
Yeah.
See, one of the big things that I see right now is that people are either going hard to the left or hard to the right, and there's this sense of detachment. And I think that's it could take us a while to fix this, But I was honored to join you for this period of time, and thank you for inviting me. I hope I brought value to your followers, and the most important thing is that I hope you and your followers go out and make way more money than you ever dreamed using my content.
Just thank you so much for being here. And I've been a reader since a few years now, been a follower since a few years now. And like, I'm really happy that if your content can be, let's say, spread in my country, that would be amazing, because I think that right now in Italy, like, we have really to catch up on a lot of things. But I think that if, I don't know, even 20 people in 20 different companies can read one of your book, I think that they can really help 20 companies to grow and get better just with a bunch of euros of investment. So that's crazy.
Here's a crazy question that I've asked of a few different people who are running some pretty large operations right now. Now, this is where a small number becomes a gigantic issue. I've said to vice presidents, CEOs, I said, what if I could come in and help your people change the profitability on your deals by 2.5% on an annual basis? What does that mean to your company? See, I did a presentation to Microsoft USA, to their platform sellers. I had 25 of them online, and I did a negotiation presentation. I did all of the ugliest negotiation strategies you can ever think of, and I did a deconstruction of them for them. And I asked that question of him, and it was kind of like, because they're $1 trillion company. And I'll tell you something else. At age 55, I couldn't have made that presentation. And this is where ageism is quite interesting. I'm 65 now. I made that presentation last year. And you know what? I felt so in the moment talking to people who are doing 9-figure deals. Yeah.
9 figures deal, it's a lot of money.
It's bigger than uno, due, tre. Anyway, tanta grazie.
No, grazie a te per essere stato qui, Patrick, and I really hope to, we will talk each other a lot, but I really hope that someone will knock on my door and say, look, I read that book, it really changed my life. Let's put it in this way. And thank you so much for what you've been done, because it's really really exceptional to get all this value out of such a, let's say, so little investment, like out of a book. Like it's plenty of value.
I have my friends in the United States. I have a few of them over there, and they say, Pat, why did you price your book this way? I mean, you gave so much. It's like you said, there's no filler in the book. And each one of the lessons, they're actually not chapters, they're lessons. So they're written in 1,200 words or less, so that you can read one in 3 minutes, and you can carry it in your briefcase. You can be sitting on the tram, or you can be traveling somewhere, and you just pop it open. And you go, oh man, I know this is going to come up, and just make some notes. And you're ready. So anyway, thank you so much,
Patrick.
Yeah.
And talk you soon. For all you're listening and will listen this, buy Perpetual Anger, Unlocking Yes, the bonus round, because you will get way more money out of them than what you invest.
I tell you what, you read all 3 and you can sell anywhere in the world. Anywhere.
Yep.
There isn't anywhere you can't sell.
So, yeah. Thank you so much, Patrick. Grazie mille.
Grazie mille. Take care.
Grazie a voi per aver ascoltato. Thanks everyone for listening, and talk to you in the next episode of the Sales Strategist podcast.